Hi, it's Dr. Parikh. We are transitioning from the literature review into the research proposal now. So we're working on the present study outline. This is really the bridge between your old paper and your new paper. So you can see there's a template, and if you click, it makes you click again. But you go right to the template. Most of the links should work that way. Some of them might just link to the generic template folder. It shows that I'm already in it. And you will, it may be easier just to copy everything over to your drive at the beginning and just look for the right file. So this paragraph is pretty formulaic, and I get this formula from a textbook that I've used for experimental psych in the past. So down here you can see the exact, the sample they use, and I have my reference down here. And then these, sometimes I do them as comments, but if you download this into a Word document, the comments don't seem to travel. So I've tried to get rid of my comments to make it more accessible. So I show you how each part of the paragraph draft matches with the sections that I'm going to talk about. And by section, I mean one or two sentences typically. So first, you're going to summarize the findings of past research. This should be easy because you've done this several times for your abstract, your roadmap paragraph, your discussion summary, and your conclusion. And you've done it every time you've explained your paper to a peer. So one or two sentences kind of saying, what's the state of affairs right now? Now, of course, this isn't really a truly thorough, conclusive literature review. You're just looking at 3 or 4 articles. But sort of where are you as far as your paper goes? The next thing you do is you point out what's missing. You create a little hole. You say, but there hasn't been research on differences between these 2 groups. Or, but this intervention hasn't been tried. Or this intervention hasn't been tried with this group. So look at the limitations you talked about before, and think about how your research question really is addressing some sort of limitation. And now, section 3, you're going to introduce the purpose of your study. So you are creating a gap and then fitting your study right in that gap. So you just say, and you can use the purpose of this study. It's okay to have, some cliched language because those are clear markers to the reader of what's happening here. And especially when you're learning how to do this kind of writing, it's fine to use some cliches. Over time, as you get more experience, you develop a little more expertise, a little more discretion of when to vary your writing and when to use clear, common phrases. Make sure that you're using consistent terms throughout, but over time, you'll learn where you can loosen up. Section 4 is where you explain. So it's like, this intervention hasn't been tried with women of color. The purpose of this study is to try this intervention with women of color. And then you would explain, and again, this may seem kind of a little over the top, but just a sentence explaining, this will help, offer evidence of whether this intervention is effective with this group. And then section 5 is where you would introduce your hypothesis. So continuing on the example I've been giving, you might say, the hypothesis is that women of color who receive this intervention will score lower on anxiety than women of color who do not receive this intervention. Or you could compare, so women of color versus white women within the U.S. or in somewhere else. I say you can use a research question, will there be a difference? But really, I do lean toward using a specific hypothesis. One group will score higher or do better or something than the other group. And again, there's the present study. Here's an example that shows you how that happens. And you can look at all of the sample research proposals will have, and I want it to have this heading. It'll, of course, be double-spaced in your paper because everything gets double-spaced in your paper. But I want you to just have this heading, the present study, and this goes right at the end of your introduction. Remember, we take what you worked on, what I called your literature review themes, and now we call that an introduction. You put the heading introduction. You don't usually see that heading in published papers. You also don't usually see the roadmap paragraph. It just kind of jumps right into the introduction. But for this paper, it's a more academic format. So you're going to have that formal roadmap and the heading for introduction. You'll have your themes. And then the present study, I want this to still be filed kind of as a level 2 heading under your introduction. So the heading will be over to the left when you draft it. This particular step seems to work really well for students. At this point, it's kind of like you've got a little confidence in your writing. You understand what your introduction was. You understand your research question and where you're going. And this step just kind of works. If you are struggling, definitely reach out to me very quickly, because if you're struggling with this, that kind of tells me you don't understand your research question and how it fits with what you've already written. As a reminder, I'm willing to suspend disbelief a little bit, meaning that if there's no measures that really fit what you would like to ask, we can fudge things a little bit. If you're having trouble finding a good research question, hopefully you have already reached out to me because that was due a little bit ago. But we can work together to find something that's you can sort of make the case for. And usually students do, this paragraph is where they sort of make sense of how the research question they're using fits with the introduction that they've written. So you know how to find me if you have any problems. But like I said, this one usually goes pretty well. It's usually a pleasure to read. Thanks. Bye-bye.